there, isn't it?
Dreaming Jaguars, fuck you, darkness.
Oh, it's here.
Dreaming Jaguars on our way to pick up the infamous Dr. David Luke. This is going to be a good one.
There's good potential for tripping over around here.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, definitely.
It's fairly flat, it's just bumpy. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
The one we done with Pascal, I literally went arse over tip.
You went base over.
You didn't leave that in though, did you?
Yeah, didn't it?
Right. Okay. So this is Dreaming Jaguars with the infamous Dr. David Luke of Greenwich University. We're going to interview him. Where are we, Dave?
Forest Row.
Forest Row.
Yeah, thanks.
On the Weald.
I'm just checking.
And it's going to be a good one. So stay tuned. Do it.
Yeah. Okay. Here we are. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks very much.
So for those people who are subscribers who don't know who you are, can you just give us a brief rundown? Your credentials, please, mate.
Yeah, so, well, I'm a psychologist, lecturer at University of Greenwich, and I'm also attached to Imperial College where they have the Psychedelic Research Centre, and I've been researching kind of weird people doing weird things with weird substances and weird places and having weird experiences for a couple of decades, i.e. psychedelic experiences, parapsychology, transpersonal psychology, altered states, you know, the weird stuff that happens when you gaze into the medicine bag for too long, basically. Right. But contextualised under the umbrella of psychology in the academy.
Right.
That's
okay.
it.
Nice. You've written quite a few papers, I saw, from your blog on the Greenwich University page. So all that is related to your findings, obviously. So what would be the most amazing thing that you can talk about today? I suppose that's some of the older stuff that's like really amazed you, I suppose.
Well, I find it all amazing, obviously, but I mean, so the main thing I look at is the kind of crossover, the intersection of the use of psychedelics primarily, but all altered states, with parapsychology as such. So, you know, precognition research, but also telepathy or out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences. Most of my research, like experimental work, has been focused on precognition, which is, you know, accessing information from the future in a way which isn't just down to inference. You know, it's like you have to kind of rule out the possibility that, you know, that something, you're just getting the information by intuiting it, but it has to be genuinely information that you could not access otherwise. So that's where most of my research has been, but all kinds of stuff, twin telepathy.
So that precognition, has that been while under the influence of a psychedelic, or is that just because lots of people believe that they have precognition anyway, don't they, without using psychedelics?
Yeah, that's true, absolutely. And a lot of my research started off with just non-psychedelic versions.
Right, okay.
And it's got some good data on that, but then I've always been interested in psychedelics, so looking to see as well, do psychedelics help? Or I don't say help, but, you know, are you more likely to detect it with a psychedelic than not under a psychedelic? Because traditionally, you know, shamans have been using these things for thousands of years. They take them to transcend time and space and communicate with spirits of nature, and to access information beyond the immediate realm of where you are in time and space. Okay. So there's an age-old tradition of this, and also people report it up the Swanee all the time with psychedelics, you know, experiences of telepathy and precognition. So just trying to take that into a controlled laboratory-like environment and seeing if we can actually establish if this is genuine in any way. That's kind of most of what I've been doing.
Ready to roll? Let's go. Okay. So
try and move a little bit slower.
Yeah. I'll follow in.
Go.
All right, so so can you take us through experiences that, or your engagement with the substances in the retreats and things that you've been to or you've been involved in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing I did when I was trying to explore this realm of, psychic abilities with psychedelics, I went out to Brazil initially and went along to a lot of ayahuasca churches and also more shamanic uses of ayahuasca, and tried to run my ESP experiments, precognition experiments, in ceremonies, which was somewhat of a disaster in a few kind of experimental ways, but I learned a lot from the process. And traditionally there's a lot of reports when the first botanists and explorers were kind of spending time in South America. There was often a lot of accounts of people who was typically the same kind of thing. They'd be in the jungle days away from any kind of communications post, and they'd get a message that, or they'd kind of have a vision of their dad was dying and their sister was sick, and they'd get out of the jungle and sure enough they'd find out their dad had died and their sister was ill and all this kind of stuff. So it was typically the people that, what you might call actually clairvoyance, more so than precognition, but people finding out stuff typically about people who are dying in the ayahuasca ceremony. And these kind of became part of the kind of ayahuasca lore, LORE, and so much so that when this Colombian chemist isolated one of the alkaloids from ayahuasca, he called it telepathy, because an earlier explorer had talked about this, it being a kind of telepathy experience. So it was originally named telepathy, so that was one of my first reasons for studying ayahuasca, for its psychic abilities.
Sure, and that's a key indicator, isn't it? Calling it telepathy.
Yeah, it's a bit of a giveaway.
It's a bit of a giveaway, and we, getting back to that's where we first met you, was at your talk in Brighton. So yeah, that's one of the first things that intrigued me when you were talking about is the fact that these people were actually getting some sort of the precognition, as you called it, to tell them that they needed to get home. And then lo and behold, when they got to civilization, there was a letter waiting for them saying, your dad's about to kick the bucket, you need to get home. So that is an amazing thing. And I mean, do you know how many accounts there were of that, or is it?
Well, there was quite a few. Yeah, there's a few kind of scattered reports, but often a lot of the explorers, if they had any experience of ayahuasca, it'd be one of those kind of stories that would be kind of popping up quite a lot. So there's quite a few accounts from the old literature, from the previous 2 centuries.
I was going to say, how long ago was that? Because I know they used it as a snuff. Didn't they use it as a snuff in the 18th century?
Well, there's a slightly different one. Yeah, there's like Yopo, which is a kind of snuff, which is more 5-MeO DMT.
Right.
And the history of that actually goes back a lot older than ayahuasca even itself. There's accounts of that going back maybe a couple of thousand years. The use of ayahuasca itself is probably, as far as we know, maybe only 500 years. And we have only got evidence for it being that old. It could be older.
Oh, really?
But it's a bit hard because, it's Amazonian practice and there's not really many kind of physical artifacts left over in the Amazon because everything's made from natural products and, it doesn't really last. So Amazonian archaeology is a bit of a tricky endeavour.
Well, but the LADAR they're doing in the Amazon now is showing loads of the civilization was massive.
Absolutely, yeah.
Apparently so, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was well populated.
So I wonder what they might find in some of these old temples or these old stone ruins. There might be some linking back to, don't know. The first thing I ever heard about DMT was that.
It was 500 years ago, was it?
It was probably a story that Paul told me, but it was like, where did they get how did they work out the two substances mixed together, the inhibitor and the DMT? Where did they get that information from? And was it one of the shamans turned around and said the trees told us? That was a story I think you told me, Paul, 15 years ago.
Plants told them.
The plants told them.
That's like kind of animistic Googling, basically, isn't it? You just chat to the trees, you want to know something. You don't Google it, you go and you take some vine and you go into an altered state. And it's an interesting story. Yeah, so Jeremy Narby kind of did the kind of maths on the back of an envelope.
That's right, it's Cosmic Serpent.
That's right, yeah. And it was like, given the number of plants in the Amazon, what are the chances of combining 2 particular plants together and getting this kind of potent combination, which is orally active DMT. And he said it was about 14 billion to 1. And then when he spoke to the indigenous guy, he says, well, you know, the trees told us. Obviously.
How much can we discuss what we did?
Well, I mean, only what we've talked about.
We've talked
so
about.
we described everything that Dave did, the experience in its totality.
We took copies of all the
I
questions
think what
that we were
what we
asked.
did is
from it.
we talked about the set and setting.
Yeah.
We talked about
How different that was.
your Wachuchu tribe shamanic ritual.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to
And
bring
then
that up.
and then we basically said that we were impressed with the experiences that we had.
Yeah.
And that's it. We haven't touched on anything about
Good.
the experience.
Leave them dangling, you know.
Yeah,
You've got to
for
tease
sure.
them, haven't you?
All right. Well, we can
How
use
long
a little.
for?
Come
Let's
on,
do it.
let's get into it then, Juzzy.
Okay. All right then. So so after we met at the Brighton talk, your Brighton talk, which was excellent. So whenever you're going to do another one, we'll talk about that at the end. You invited us to do the telepathy experiment, and so we have discussed it a little bit on camera, but we want to try and go in as far as we can without actually letting the cat out of the bag for you. So
Yeah.
from our experience, or from my personal experience, when you came to the place that we used the substance in,
Chuck a bit of incrimination in there, Juzzy. That we were going to do the experiment, probably be a better.
okay, so
We were going to use the substance.
Take me now.
I said, come on, you'll never take me alive, you fuckers. All right, we'll start again. Okay, so
it's good.
yeah, so when we did the experiment with you, there were a few things that were different for us, which was your what's the word I'm looking
Ritual.
for? The ritual, yeah, the start
ceremony.
ritual. So okay, give us a background from that, from what ritual, what it all means.
So it's really just like, I mean, one of the things, we've had like these huge long discussions with some kind of all manner of people from different fields of research and perspectives, and you know, those are people who believe that, you know, DMT is something quite sacred, and they often like, well, you know, you've got to treat this thing with respect because we don't know what we're encountering, right? Obviously those who are more neuroscientifically minded are like, well, it's just your own brain, but we don't want to really take any chances, so we've been kind of implementing what we call a bit of metaphysical hygiene, which is, you know,
nice.
just in case we are encountering something which is other than us, we should be going into it with complete respect. And so all I did basically was just a kind of little offering, a kind of sign of respect, which we might do in a kind of shamanic ritual. I've been working for the last like 8 or 9 years with a tribe from Mexico called the Baradica. They use peyote, but you know, the principles are still the same. It's like you kind of just make your offerings to the spirits of the place and at the time, and ask for, you know, say that you come with respect and that you come on a mission of discovery and curiosity.
So it's setting out intent really of a peaceful encounter, and
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, who are we to say? I mean, if we're coming to this as truly open-minded scientists, then we have to also be open to the idea then that, you know, we may be encountering genuinely discarnate sentient entities on the other side, and so we should be ambassadors at least, you know, as is it Terence McKenna said, we should be opening up embassies to the kind of the other world. So in that case, you guys are the diplomats, and we're just there to kind of make sure that you have a good meeting.
Ready?
so yeah, what are you going to go on then?
I'm going to try and tap into Dave's personal ensemble of experiences.
Okay,
Go for it.
Okay.
well, we are recording.
I'm recording. So, I get to have a little question with Dave. So, Dave, from your own experiences, you know, either yourself or experiences that you've encountered through your research, what is your can you pinpoint one that was completely sort of exquisitely mind-blowing, although they all are, but something that really struck home with you, that sort of resonates in the field that you're researching predominantly, if that makes sense?
I mean, they've all been pretty full on. I guess the one of my favourites though is, if we're talking about encounters with entities in particular, which is one of my areas of interest, you know, ultimately we're trying to get to the hub of. One of my experiences was actually not with DMT or anything most people have ever heard of, but with Brugmansia floripondio, which is part of the Datura family. It's a fairly long story, but I'll try and keep it short. So I've been organising this conference in Brazil, and every night we'd go off and see some local group, you know, ayahuasca with the Indians one night, and then, you know, transpossession cult the next night, and then on the final night, as a bit of a holiday, we were just going for a tobacco ceremony because we were all a bit wiped out, you know. And so the Indians were supposedly just going to give us tobacco. We went there, we thought, oh, this would be great. And then everything went super weird, you know. We didn't know what was going on, and we lost hours of time. Everything was super strange. Nobody had a clue what had happened. Like the next morning, we're like trying to piece together. And, you know, there was a couple of my ex-students there, and they were like, well, you know, what happened? I was like, well, I don't know. Like, did you see the little man running around in the Indian's hut around the fireplace? I was like, no, I don't think I did. It's like, well, what did he look like? It's like, oh, he had like big almond-shaped eyes, was about this big. You know, he looked about 300 years old. I was like, what? And it's like, you both saw him? It's like, yeah, we both saw him. I was like, well, it can't have been an hallucination then. And it's like, look, we drew a picture actually, and she showed me this picture. She'd done a sketch of her and her mate and this little kind of, let's call him, little dude. I was like, oh, I didn't see him, but I saw a woman look just like him on the minibus coming back, you know. Right. And sure enough, on the way home from the Indian's hut, which was very strange, there was a tiny little whizzing old woman over the seats, a couple of rows in front of me, peering at me, winking at me conspiratorially, you know, oh, like that. Smile from ear to ear, big black almond eyes, wizened face, about 300 years old. I was just like, wow, how is it we all saw something, you know, completely naively as well, that all tallies up, you know. I mean, it's one thing to have your own hallucination.
Yeah, but shared.
Yeah, I mean, that just takes it to the next level of weirdness, doesn't it?
It's a very bizarre accounts, aren't they? I mean, I've had my own many entity encounters, and they all feel, certainly when you get into the deeper realms of DMT and the DMT flash, that they are their own thing. They're not, you know, you kind of go into the experience, and if you have a lighter dose, and I've said this before on one of our previous videos, that the background becomes animated and you can have dancing, this and that. You could write that off as possibly something that your mind is trying to familiarise, or, you know, because it's in turmoil, it's trying to sort of keep hold of something familiar, so it makes. But when you get into the real deep states and these entities are there, freestanding in all their glory, you know, godlike in their power, and that definitely feels like it's something other than what is going on in the mind, in my opinion. So yeah, it's interesting to hear those accounts. That's definitely sounds like a good one.
It passes the taste test, doesn't it?
Right, does it?
Yeah, your fucking head keeps disappearing off the top of the camera. Where there's a dip inside of me.
We can just like go down a bit. Does that help?
All right.
Okay then. So, well, thanks, Dave.
My pleasure.
It's been amazing.
Hang on, we're going to do the Mother Nature question.
Yeah, we are.
Oh,
So, thanks, Dave, for your time.
My pleasure.
I suppose one question to close is, where do you see this pushing us as a race, as a people, in the future? What would the benefits be, and how far could that go? You know, with regards to us as a civilization, can it make us? Can it break us? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, this is no small question. I mean, one of the interesting things that came up with people in our discussions with about DMT, some of the greatest minds we could gather was like, you know, that maybe these entities are us from the future. That's one of the possibilities. It's like a kind of future us speaking back to us in time, dragging us into the future in our own development, and, you know, perhaps going off and terramorphing other planets and just going out into the cosmos. That was one idea. But, you know, I think they can, on a kind of more like local, like immediate level, I think they can help in all kinds of ways. You know, we already know about the kind of clinical benefits for mental health, but also for like insight, you know, and creative problem solving, and just discovering new things and finding out information, you know, just kind of learning about the universe and about ourselves. You know, kind of they're almost endless for that, not just on a kind of level of kind of making us more whole, but of making us grow as well.
Cool.
The point I made was about the fact that the mycelium gives the trees and all the stuff around it this knowledge and this information, and I kind of look at psychedelics and the mushroom as doing the same thing to us. It's feeding us with information, and I think that is a really cool way of looking at the psychedelics in that way. It's not something. I mean, I've never done aside from the youth where you kind of find this stuff and it's a bit of fun that's there. You know, later on in our life when we came across DMT, it was never ever done in this recreational, let's have a bit of a smash out on D, because you just don't, because the reaction that you get from that stuff, sometimes it is not a fun time to go through. So I'm just looking at your take, I suppose, on the Mother Nature side of it. Is it actually there, like you said, trying to feed us this information the same as it does with the forests and the trees and whatever it is that's growing around there?
Well, it's interesting. I've actually written an essay or two on this, but, you know, one of the things that people, when they feel like they're connected to nature through psychedelics, it's primarily the mushrooms that people are communicating with. And when they do talk to nature with the mushrooms, it's always the same message. It's like, wake up, you monkeys, what do you think you're doing? You know, you're making a terrible mess of the place. So that's usually, you know, if you want to communicate with nature, that's what she's going to tell you most of the time. It's not like,
pretty much,
you know, maybe have a better work-life balance. It's like, stop wrecking the place, you guys, you know.
Stop chucking plastic away,
Yeah.
That's good.
That's a good ending, isn't it? Stop chucking plastic away, for God's sake.
All right, well then. So what do we want to, how do you want to close it, mate? How do you want to close it? Dave, anything you want to say?
No, I'm good, man. It's all good. I just react. You know?
Anything you want to plug? Anything? Any your books you want to?
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, you didn't mention this, guys. You know.
Of course, Otherworlds.
Yeah. Which is the great handbook of all kind of psychedelic weirdness, basically. But all my work's in there pretty much.
Fantastic.
Well, it's condensed of 7 years research into one juicy little book, and it does a bit of everything.
Is that the latest?
No, it's one of my early ones. No, it is actually latest because it's second edition. It's been.
That can be purchased on all internet platforms.
Yeah, maybe even our website at some point.
Okay, well, thank you, Dave. It's been amazing, mate.
My pleasure, guys.
And,
Cut to B-roll.
we'll see you in the next one.